More teenagers and preteens are seeking transitions, though the medical community that treats them is deeply divided about why and what to do to help them. Louisiana's legislature this week advanced a bill that would prohibit doctors from performing gender transition procedures like hormone treatments. I spoke with Britain's foremost authority on gender dysphoria care, Dr. Hakeem, and heard his concerns about anything that he says would permanently harm children.
I'm a consultant psychiatrist and a medical psychotherapist, and I've been specializing in the psychotherapeutic treatment of people with gender dysphoria, adults, for 23 years. So I've been doing it quite a long time.
And in that time, you have seen a lot of change, especially in the past 5 years. What is prompting this?
So you've got to divide the trans population into the people who would otherwise have formerly been called transvestites, those who like dressing up, those who would have formerly been called transsexuals, the ones who want to have permanent bodily changes, and other people who might have other fetishes and things, which, you know, all come under the new trans umbrella. So trans is very non-specific, and there's always been far more transvestites than transsexuals. The other thing to factor in is that there's a massive increase in young children identifying as trans and non-binary. And what myself and many other clinicians feel is that isn't really a transsexual thing. It isn't that we suddenly have an epidemic of transsexual children. I understand that as a current form of youth subculture, you know, like punks and goths. You know, when I went to school and someone had crazy hair and lipstick and we said, "Oh, you're really cool. What are you?" "I'm a goth." We all became goths. Now, when a child goes to school and someone similar to that person in their hair and their makeup turns up and they go, "You're really cool. What are you?" "Oh, I'm trans non-binary." They're all trans non-binary. And the worst thing we can do is presume it's a medical condition. And it's not. There's a lot of myths flying around. So one myth is that people are born in the wrong body. There's no evidence that that's the case. Brains of people with gender dysphoria are exactly the same as people without. Nobody's born in the wrong body. There are lots of psychological conditions where people are very unhappy with their body, whether it's anorexia, body dysmorphia, but we always treat those psychologically. We never collude with the anorexic and say, "Yes, you need to be thinner." We never collude with the body dysmorphia, say, "Yes, your body's all wrong." So for these kids, the concern is that they're being put on this conveyor belt of physical treatments, which are irreversible. There's another myth. There's a myth that the medications that we call puberty blockers are reversible. They're not. Puberty blockers is a sanitized term for chemical castration. If you're uncertain or not sure about your physical sex, then at least going through puberty will reinforce what you are. And the risk is, if you're not certain about your sex and then you don't go through puberty, then that just reinforces that you're not really a boy or a girl. So rather than being helpful, it's unhelpful. There's another myth that if you don't give these children puberty blockers, they're at a higher risk of suicide. That's a myth. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. We label these people as gender dysphoric, but we don't look at other things. And what I found in my population was the males, 100% of them, of the males I saw who would be called transsexual, were on the autistic spectrum. And the females, they seem to have a higher incidence of trauma, often sexual trauma, or they had a degree of homophobia, so lesbophobia, either internalized or externalized from the cultures and societies that they were in. So it was a way of escaping from that with a fantasy solution. Gender ideology is the current new religion. It's part of social justice theory, all those other things. Gender ideology is made up. It's a social construct. It's a cult belief. Gender is a social construct. We have sex, we have male and female sexes, and some people are hermaphrodite, very small number. But gender is a social construct. And the idea that gender ideology is replacing biological sex is very unfortunate. It's not helpful because it doesn't exist.
The data and the statistics that typically would be driving such change What does that look like?
There isn't any. So if you go to hospital for a minor procedure, like a fingernail operation, there'll be tons of outcome data on that. For some reason, giving children chemical castration and cross-sex hormones, there is no data. So the big criticism of the main clinic in the UK, the Tavistock Gids Clinic, was that why aren't you collecting data? And what's very strange is that myself and my research team created an outcome measuring tool, which is free to use, takes 10 minutes, and will measure outcomes. It's the only one that exists. And I've been sending it to this clinic that was much criticized in the UK, and to date they refused to respond to any of my letters. I'm not asking for any money for it. It's a free to use tool, widely available online, but there seems to be a resistance to collecting data, which is very, very suspicious.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, speak to you soon.